Hi everyone, it's Jessica and I am back today with the Craft IQ December Challenge. There you can see all of the layers that I'm going to include as part of this month's challenge, and I'm going to be using it to scrapbook this page here of my oldest daughter's last day of the first grade. Now I've gone ahead and prepped a couple of pieces using a bunch of different mix-in papers from Close to My Heart, and I've cut those hearts, and I've also got this strip here of this pretty green paper, and I do need to include that fancied up edge, and so I pulled out my Fancy Borders thin cut, and of course again from Close to My Heart, and I'm just going to attach this to that strip of paper. And then this one is really pretty because when it cuts you end up with this row of hearts, and so it's super cute. And I'm just going to use a little bit of washi tape here to hold this in place. That way when I run it through my Cuttlebug, I know that my cut is straight as well. And so I'm going to go ahead and put that in my plates and run it through. And now obviously my thin cut isn't as long as my strip of paper, and that's fine because after I ran it through the first time, I just lined that die right back up and went ahead and cut it again until I reached the end of that paper. And then you can see here, this is what it ends up looking like. And even though the place where it met, where I ran that second cut through, it's just a very slight little noticeable cut there, but you can't really tell. And by the time I finish embellishing my page, you won't even be able to see it. So even though they're not long enough, they are. You can keep running them through your cutter. All right, I'm going to go ahead and take this pretty sapphire piece of pattern paper and attach it to the right side of my piece of white daisy. And I'm just using my Versamat and my T-square ruler to make sure that everything is going on straight. And this one, in retrospect, I probably should have glued this particular green piece down first because I didn't really leave myself a whole lot of space underneath that sapphire one to wiggle it under without hitting some of my adhesive. And so it would have been smart of me to put the green one down first and then put the sapphire piece down second. So I did have to kind of fuss with that a little bit off camera, but I think that that's on okay. And then what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to take these hearts that I have cut with my Cricut, and I am going to use them to paper piece a flower. Now, paper piecing something on the background that covered at least a third of the background was one of the first layers that we had to include. And this was a bit of a challenge for me. I don't think I really do paper piecing. I had to look it up to make sure that I was doing it correctly. And I think that this works and counts. I hope it does anyway. So I'm just using halves of the hearts to create flower petals. And so to make them stand out a little bit against my white daisy background, I'm just taking my sapphire ink pad and edge distressing all of them. And I won't make you watch me do all of that. So I've gone ahead and finished doing those. And then I have also used my stitched circles thin cuts to cut out a little white circle that is going to be the center of my flower. And I'm alternating my pieces so that my flower, so it's not just like the hearts all together, but you know, the alternating halves of the hearts. And I think that that's how I'm going to end up adhering everything down. I'm going to go ahead and put my photos down first because I'm thinking that the flower petals will overlap just a little bit. So I have put both of those down there. I had two 2x2 photos and then one that was 4x6, but I cut it down just a little bit so that way it was kind of matted on that sapphire piece of cardstock. And then I took the first petal and just kind of eyeballed where I wanted it to go. And then once I had one of them glued down, the rest of them were very easy to do. So I just lined up the edges, and I could tell where the center of the heart had been because it wasn't quite as rounded on the inside corner. And so I just made sure to kind of match up the outer edges of each heart with the inner edges, if that makes sense. Kind of putting those hearts back together just with the different pieces of pattern paper. So like you said, once I kind of put that first petal down, then I just made sure that all of my edges were touching and that I had the correct half of the heart as I went around in my circle. And so I hope that this counts as paper piecing at least a third of my background, creating my own flower this way with the halves of a heart. So it ended up being really fun. Like I said, I don't really do this very often, and so that was a challenge, and that's one of the things that I really like about participating in this Craft IQ challenge is sometimes it pushes you out of your comfort zone and makes you think about different ways of pulling your layout together than you would have otherwise. All right, now I've used my layered flowers thin cuts. I love these things. If you've been watching any of my videos lately, you've noticed me use them on quite a few layouts lately. And I've gone ahead and cut a bunch of them out with some Clover cardstock. And again, I had already glued things down and didn't really think about leaving myself some of that space to tuck things under. That was definitely something I was struggling with this particular layout. But I managed to kind of wiggle that one in, and then I'm going to put a couple of these leaves here. Now, when I do cut those leaves, I will often cut one of the stems and leaves off, and then that way I can kind of make them look the way I want them to look. So, this is what it looks like right here, the one I've got in my hand when you run it through the die, but then you can definitely easily trim one of those off if it's too big of a cluster of leaves for what you're trying to do. And so I'm just going to kind of stick this one over here, and then whatever I have sticking out off the edge of my page, I will just trim off. See here, I can just kind of cut a little bit. I just made it so that way I didn't really have to put it underneath of my flower petal, but I cut it on an angle so that it would look like it was coming out from under it. So I kind of fixed that little mess. All right, and then like I said, trim off the excess, and there is my flower. I'm going to take that stitch circle and put that in the center. And then I cut a couple of other flowers as well from that same thin cut set, those layered flowers. And I used the same colors of cardstock that are in the pattern papers that I'm using. So I have Sapphire and Ballerina. And the fun thing about those layered flowers is you can kind of match them up in all sorts of different combinations. And so I just kind of picked a center that I liked and then I put it into that sapphire flower. And I'm going to put that down there and the circle in here. And then my flower is done. Okay, so we have taken care of the circle, the paper piecing. I fancied up an edge. I've used at least 3 colors on my page. And let's see, what else do I need to do? I need some sparkles, and I need some stars, and I need some ribbon and some twine. All right, now off camera, I did start stitching with some embroidery thread around the edges of each of those petals. And so I'm down to my last one, so I'm just going to show you what I did here. I put a little foam mat underneath my page, and then I used my Close to My Heart piercing tool to poke holes all the way around. And then I just have 3 strands of embroidery floss in my needle, and then I just am going to kind of stitch all the way around to outline those petals a little bit more. After I had edge distressed them, I thought they didn't pop quite enough. And this is actually the left-hand side of a double page layout. I'm going to focus on mostly this page here for this particular video, but I will show you in some still shots at the end of the video what the other side looks like. And I had done some hand stitching on that right-hand side, and so I wanted to bring that element over to my left-hand side as well. So I put a little X into the center of that flower. And now I need to put my title down, and I'm thinking it's going to go in this white space here beneath my flower. So I'm going to stamp directly onto my layout, which I'm not going to lie, was a bit of a risk and did make me slightly nervous at this point because, it took me 4 to 5 minutes to stitch each petal. So, one petal was not too long, but by the time I had done all of the stitching all the way around the flower, I had a decent amount of time invested into this page, and I thought, oh gosh, if I stamp on it and I mess it up, I'm going to be really angry with myself. So it was a bit of a risk, but it turned out fine. So to make sure that I got things down straight, I just used my Versamat and T-square ruler to put some pencil lines down. And then I am using, this is the Pennant banner alphabet. It also comes with some fun little thin cuts that you can make some pennant banners with. And I'm just going to stamp farewell. And so I was kind of counting out on my fingers how many letters are in the word farewell. And I wanted to figure out about which letter was halfway through the word. And so I'm going to start with that is letter E. And I'm just going to eyeball about where halfway is on my little pencil line there. And then I will spell the word out from there. And so I tend to kind of go to the right of the word after doing that, just to kind of finish spelling it correctly, going in that direction before I'll go back and stamp the letters on the left-hand side. It kind of helps me to make sure I don't accidentally spell things wrong. Like I said, since I was stamping on my page directly, I really didn't want to mess that part up. All right, now this is a simple serif uppercase alphabet. There is a lowercase stamp set as well, and then these also have coordinating die cuts, thin cuts, that are a lot of fun to use. But I'm using just the uppercase stamps, and I'm going to stamp out the word first grade underneath. And again, I made myself those pencil lines so that I can stamp everything straight. And I'm just paying really close attention to when I ink up my stamp that I don't have any spare ink on my block that's going to accidentally mark up my page. All right, now this is the Counting My Blessings stamp set, and there are these really pretty little stars on there. Some of them are solid and some of them are outline stars, and they're different shapes. And so I'm just going to pull two of those, one that's a little bit bigger in the outline, and I'm going to stamp that around my page, kind of putting it, in and among my title, and then also up here in the top by my flower. And then after I've done that one that's slightly larger, I'm going to come in with the smaller star that is on this stamp set, and it's a solid one. And so I really like the way that that looks with the combination of the outline and the solid star. And so stars was one of the things I had to include for the challenge. So now I've got that one crossed off my list. And at this point, I think the only two things I have left to do are to add some sparkle and to add some ribbon or some twine. So I'm going to finish putting those stars on and put a couple more over here by that side of the flower. And I like that. I've already stamped those on my right-hand side page too, which you will see here at the end when I show you the still shots. All right, so for the sparkle, I'm going to go for my clear shimmer brush, which is always something that I love to reach for and add a little sparkle and shine to my projects. I'm just going to shake it up and make sure I've got all that ink mixed together nicely. And then it really just works a little bit like a paintbrush. You can just paint right over your paper and it will add this really pretty subtle sparkle and shine to it. And it takes a couple of minutes to dry, and that's it. It's like a fun way to add a little bit of glitter to your project. And so I went around those petals on both of those flowers, and that's it. Here you can see the companion page that I had created ahead of time, and so there's some of that stitching that I had done. So I wanted to make sure that I had put some stitching on the other side as well. And you can see I've got the stars over there. Here's a little closer look at some of those petals. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed and that you feel inspired. There are a lot of other very talented ladies playing along with the Craft IQ challenge, and we are all hopping through our YouTube videos, so make sure to check through the links below and see what they did with these different layers. I hope you guys are having a wonderful holiday season, and I will see you in January for the next Craft IQ challenge. Happy crafting!